the child who was never reported missing. On a quiet Wednesday afternoon in New Britain, Connecticut, a phone call came in that at first sounded ordinary. A neighbor reported seeing a man struggling to move a large plastic storage bin behind an abandoned house on Clark Street. The house had been empty for years. Most people had stopped noticing it, but something about the way the man rushed, glancing over his shoulder, unsettled the caller enough to dial 911. When police arrived, they expected illegal dumping, maybe vandalism. What they found instead would become one of the most disturbing child abuse cases Connecticut had seen in decades. Behind the house sat a heavy plastic bin, partially hidden under a tarp. As an officer lifted the lid, a smell rushed out that immediately told them this was not trash. Inside were human remains. Small, fragile, a child. The scene was sealed off within minutes. Yellow tape wrapped the property. As detectives from New Britain Police and the State Police Major Crimes Unit arrived, word spread quickly. Neighbors stepped outside, confused and frightened. No one recognized the bin. No one remembered a child living there. And then came the detail that stunned even veteran investigators. The child inside that bin had been dead for months, possibly close to a year. As forensic teams worked to identify her, a troubling realization began to take shape. There were no active missing child reports that matched, no Amber Alerts, no frantic parents searching the streets, no school notices, no flyers. She had disappeared without anyone noticing. Days later, dental records and DNA confirmed her identity. Her name was Jacqueline Torres Garcia. She was 12 years old. Jacqueline, known to family as Mimi, should have been living with her mother in nearby Farmington. According to school records, she had been withdrawn for homeschooling. According to welfare records, she was safe. According to the system designed to protect her, nothing was wrong, yet her body had been hidden behind an abandoned house. The discovery raised a question so disturbing, it echoed through press conferences and courtrooms alike. How does a child vanish for nearly a year without a single report? To understand the answer, investigators had to go backward, back through custody battles, back through paperwork, back through a family already known to child services. Jacqueline was born in 2012 in New Britain. Her early life was unstable. When she was still an infant, her mother, Carla Garcia, was detained in 2013. The Connecticut Department of Children and Families stepped in and placed the baby with relatives. Soon after, her grandmother, Patricia Delgado, became her legal guardian through juvenile court. For years, Delgado provided stability. Jacqueline attended school. She had routines. Teachers described her as quiet, polite, and gentle. She loved drawing and carried stuffed animals well past the age when most kids let them go. To those around her, she was safe. But beneath the surface, tension never fully disappeared. As Jacqueline grew older, her mother pushed to regain custody. Court filings stretched on for years. Delgado resisted, believing her granddaughter was better off where she was. Child welfare reports came and went, often focused on younger siblings, never Jacqueline herself. On paper, the system appeared to work. Then, in June 2024, everything changed. After a brief court hearing lasting less than 10 minutes, Carla Garcia was granted full custody of her daughter. No DCF representative was present. No objections were raised. The case was treated as routine. Jacqueline went home with her mother. No one knew it would be the last time she was seen alive outside that house. Behind closed doors. That summer, Carla Garcia moved with her children to a small apartment in Farmington, about 15 miles from New Britain. To neighbors, the family appeared private, but unremarkable. A woman, her boyfriend, and children who mostly stayed inside. Soon after the move, Carla filed paperwork withdrawing Jacqueline from public school. She stated that her daughter would be homeschooled. The form was accepted without question. In the years since the pandemic, homeschooling had become common. Teachers noted the withdrawal, but had no legal authority to challenge it. That single form would later become one of the most important documents in the case, because after August 2024, Jacqueline effectively disappeared. Her father, Victor Torres, noticed almost immediately. He had fought for years to remain in his daughter's life. After custody was transferred, his calls went unanswered. His messages were ignored. Court motions received no response. He later told investigators he just wanted to see his children, even for a day. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Jacqueline's world was shrinking. According to arrest warrants and witness statements, discipline inside the home escalated into control. Food became punishment. Movement became restricted. Jacqueline was isolated from anyone who could see her condition. Carla Garcia later admitted to police that she stopped feeding her daughter for weeks. She said it was discipline, a way to correct behavior. Her boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, was not a bystander. Text messages and phone records showed that he knew about the starvation. Witnesses stated that he helped restrain Jacqueline using zip ties. Photos recovered from phones showed the child bound, lying on the floor, unable to move. One of the most chilling details came from Jacqueline's own family. Her aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, visited the apartment regularly. She saw the child restrained. She saw her condition worsening. During questioning, she told investigators she believed Jacqueline was going to die. She did nothing. By September 2024, Jacqueline was barely alive. Investigators believe she died around September 19. There were no signs of blunt trauma, no fatal wounds. The cause of death was prolonged neglect and starvation. She was 12 years old. No one called 911. No one sought medical help. Instead, her body was hidden in the apartment. For months, life continued above her remains. Police were even called to the apartment once for a noise complaint in December. Officers spoke with Carla and Jonathan. They joked about pregnancy mood swings. They asked routine questions. Jacqueline was never mentioned. The officers had no reason to search the basement. No report of a missing child. No smell strong enough yet to raise suspicion. And so they left. As decomposition worsened, Carla and Jonathan allegedly stayed in hotels and with friends. Eventually, plans were made to move. In early 2025, a DCF caseworker reached out, not about Jacqueline, but about her younger sibling. When asked about Jacqueline, Carla claimed she was being homeschooled and staying out of state. The caseworker requested a video call. What appeared on the screen shocked investigators later. A different child, smiling, waving, answering to the name Mimi. The deception worked. DCF noted no concerns. The file was closed. Jacqueline had already been dead for months. The discovery. By March 2025, Carla moved back to New Britain. Among the belongings packed into the vehicle was a large plastic storage bin. Inside, it was Jacqueline's body. According to Jonathan Nanita's statement, he attempted to dispose of the bin multiple times. He claimed there was blood on the walls in the apartment. He claimed Carla told him not to worry. Eventually, the bin was left behind in an abandoned house on Clark Street. That is where a neighbor noticed something was wrong. When the mayor of New Britain addressed the media, she called it one of the most heartbreaking cases the city had seen in over 30 years. Detectives said the same. Arrests came quickly. Carla Garcia was taken into custody without incident. Her sister followed shortly after. Jonathan Nanita was arrested the next day after attempting to hide. All three appeared calm. The charges were severe. Carla Garcia was charged with murder, with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and cruelty to a child. Bond was set at $5 million. Jonathan Nanita faced the same murder charge and tampering with evidence. His bond was also set at $5 million. Jacqueline Garcia, the aunt, was charged with unlawful restraint and cruelty to a person under 19. Her bond was $1 million. In court, family members wept. Some had to be removed after emotional outbursts. Many wore shirts with Jacqueline's face printed on them. Reporters uncovered even more troubling details. Carla Garcia had a prior domestic assault conviction that was not raised during custody proceedings. Her sister had previously been charged after bringing an infant with multiple fractures to a hospital. Critics demanded answers. How did the court grant custody without deeper review? How did homeschooling remove visibility? How did a video call replace an in-person check? And how did a child die while surrounded by adults who all chose silence? Mimi's Law. In the weeks that followed, grief turned into anger, then into action. A father in Bridgeport started a petition calling for reform. He named it Mimi's Law, using the nickname Jacqueline's family once called her. The proposal focused on one simple truth: children who disappear quietly need protection too. Mimi's Law called for mandatory in-person welfare checks for homeschooled children, body cameras for child services workers, residency restrictions, preventing convicted child abusers from living with minors. Within days, thousands signed. Vigils were held. Candles lined City Hall steps spelling her name. Lawmakers from both parties expressed support. For many, this was about more than one child. It was about how easily the system can look away. Jacqueline Torres Garcia did not vanish suddenly. She faded from sight step by step. Each form signed, each visit closed, each assumption made. Her death was not caused by a single failure. It was caused by many small ones. And now, her name remains, not just as a victim, but as a warning. If you have thoughts on what should change, share them below. Conversations like this matter, because the next child who disappears quietly may still be alive, and noticing might be the difference.